Most likely Jacob has just buried his father Isaac. He had also made amends with Esau and now lived peacefully in the land of Canaan. Joseph is 17 years old and is tending his father's flock, and he began to dream special dreams, which he told to his brothers and to his father. From there, this story about Joseph begins. Yes, how it starts as his father's dearest son, how he became a slave and eventually even has to go to prison. But in the end, his dreams come true when he becomes Viceroy and meets his brothers again. At Bible Teller, we post weekly videos about the Bible with the support of AI images. So increase your Bible knowledge and immerse yourself in the beautiful stories. Joseph was out in the field looking after his father's flocks. And his father Jacob loved Joseph so much that he favored him over the rest of his brothers, who of course also realized this. One day, his father gave Joseph a beautiful garment in all different colors, and his brothers began to hate him because their father loved him so much. And Joseph came one day to his brothers and said, "Guys, listen to this dream I had. We were all binding sheaves in the field, and my sheaf stood up and stood upright, and your sheaves came to me and bowed to my sheaf." Then his brothers said, "What do you mean by this, Joseph? Do you want us to kneel before you, who you rule over us?" Because of this, they began to hate Joseph even more. Shortly afterwards, Joseph had another dream and went to his brothers and his father again and said, "Listen, I had another dream. The sun, moon, and 11 stars bowed down to me." And his father said, "Joseph, what are you dreaming about now, man? Should your mother, your brothers, and I bow to you?" And his brothers were jealous of him, but his father remembered the words. And Joseph's brothers went to Shechem to keep their father's flock there. And Jacob said to Joseph, "Are your brothers not at Shechem to keep the flocks there? Go to them and see how they are doing, and then come back and tell me." So Joseph went to his brothers, and they saw Joseph walking from afar and said to one another, "Look over there, our master dreamer is coming to visit us." And they consulted together how to kill him. But Reuben did not want that and thought how he could deliver Joseph from his brothers and said, "Let us not kill our own brother, but throw him into this pit in the wilderness." For Reuben thought that after this, he could rescue Joseph and bring him back to his father. And so it came to pass that Joseph came to his brothers, and they stripped off his fine robe and cast him into a dry well. Then they sat down and ate their meal. And in the distance, they saw a caravan approaching on its way to Egypt. Then Judah said to his brothers, "What is the point of killing our brother? Let us sell him and get something for him." And they pulled Joseph out of the pit and went to the caravan and sold Joseph for 20 pieces of silver. And the caravan took Joseph to Egypt. And Reuben went to the well and saw Joseph no longer sitting, and he ran to his brethren and said, "Joseph is no more. How can I ever return to my father?" And he was crying. The brothers took Joseph's robe, slaughtered a kid of the goats, and dipped the robe in the blood. They sent a servant to Jacob and said, "Is this your son's robe?" And Jacob recognized Joseph's robe, and the servant said, "A wild animal has eaten him. Your son Joseph has undoubtedly been torn to pieces." And Jacob tore his clothes and put on sackcloth and wept for his son many days. And his sons and daughters did all they could to comfort Jacob, but he refused, saying, "I will go to my grave weeping, for my son is dead." And Joseph was brought into Egypt and was bought by Potiphar. He was chief of Pharaoh's guard. And the Lord was with Joseph, and it went well. And Joseph remained in Potiphar's house. And Potiphar saw that the Lord was with Joseph, and that all went very well. And Joseph found favor in the sight of Potiphar, and he made him ruler over all his house and all that he had. And because Joseph was made head over all things, the Lord blessed all the house of Potiphar, and it prospered both in the house and in the field. And Potiphar only knew about his food because he left everything to Joseph, and he was handsome. And after Joseph had received so much power in Potiphar's house, his wife said to Joseph, "Sleep with me." But Joseph refused and said to the woman, "After my boss has given me so much power in this house, and he no longer has any knowledge of what is happening in his house, should I now trick him into lying with you? No one is as high as I am, and my boss has given me authority over everything except you. So shall I do this evil and sin against God?" And the woman spake unto Joseph every day, "Sleep with me." But Joseph did not want to listen to her. And so it came to pass one day that Joseph came into the house to go to work, and none of the workmen was in the house. And the woman took Joseph by his garment and said, "Sleep with me." But Joseph ran away and left his garment with the woman and fled outside. Then the woman began to shout, and the servants in the house came running and asked what was the matter. And the woman said, "My husband brought a Hebrew man into his house, and he wanted to sleep with me. But when I shouted, he ran away and left his garment with me." And the woman told all this to her husband, and he became furious. Then Potiphar sent for Joseph and threw him into prison. But the Lord was with Joseph and gave favor in the sight of the governor of the prison, so that Joseph could do all the work. And the Lord blessed it and made everything prosper in Joseph's hand. And it came to pass that the baker and the cupbearer sinned against Pharaoh of Egypt, and he was angry and put them in prison. And Joseph was appointed to minister to them all those days. And in one night, the baker and the butler both had a dream about Pharaoh of Egypt. And Joseph came to them in the morning and asked them, "Why are you so sad today? We had a dream, and there is no one who can interpret it." But Joseph said, "Doesn't the explanation come from God? Please tell me what the dream is." Then the cupbearer began to tell. "In my dream, a vine stood before me, and on the vine were 3 branches, and the vine was budding and blossoming, and the bunches producing ripe grapes. Now Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, and I took the grapes and pressed them into Pharaoh's cup and gave the cup into Pharaoh's hand." And Joseph said, "This is the interpretation of your dream. The 3 branches represent 3 days. Within 3 days Pharaoh will restore you to your work, and you shall give the cup to Pharaoh as you did before. But please remember me when you come out of this house and tell anything to Pharaoh so I can get out of prison, because I was kidnapped here and I didn't do anything to be in prison." And the baker heard Joseph's positive explanation, and he also said to Joseph, "I also had a dream. There were 3 baskets of white loaves on my head. In the top basket will be all kinds of food for Pharaoh, but the birds ate from that basket." Joseph said, "The 3 baskets mean 3 days. Within 3 days Pharaoh will exalt you on high and hang you on a stake, and the birds will eat your flesh." And it came to pass 3 days later that the cupbearer was restored to his work, so that he poured again for Pharaoh. But the baker was hanged as Joseph had explained. The cupbearer thought no more of Joseph and forgot him. And after a long time that Joseph was in prison, Pharaoh had a dream, and he was standing by the Nile, and there came out 7 cows, fair in appearance, fat in flesh, and they grazed in the grass. But after them came out 7 more cows, ugly in appearance and lean in flesh, and they went to the other cows and ate the 7 good cows. And then Pharaoh woke up. Then he went back to sleep and dreamed another dream. He saw 7 ears of corn growing in one stalk, thick and beautiful. Then 7 thin and scorched ears of corn came up, and the thin ears of corn swallowed up the 7 thick ears of corn. And Pharaoh woke up again and saw that it was a dream. The next morning he walked restlessly to and fro, and sent servants to call all the magicians and sages. And Pharaoh told his dreams, but there was no one to interpret them. Then Pharaoh's cupbearer stood up, and behold, now I have to go back in time when Pharaoh was still angry with me. At that time he had me imprisoned in prison, at the same time as the baker. We both had a dream then, and our dreams both had their own meaning. And there was a Hebrew boy with us, and we told our dreams, and he gave us the interpretation of our dream. And as he had interpreted the dreams, so it happened. Then Pharaoh sent for Joseph, and the servants took Joseph, and washed him, and made him good, and brought him unto Pharaoh. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, "I had a dream, and there is no one who can explain it to me. If you hear the dream, can you explain it to me?" Joseph said, "That is not up to me, but God will answer and explain." This is how Pharaoh told his dreams to Joseph. Then Joseph told Pharaoh the interpretation of the dreams and said, "The dreams that Pharaoh had are one. God has made known to Pharaoh what he is going to do. The 7 beautiful cows mean 7 years. The same applies to the 7 good ears of corn. The 7 lean cows and the 7 scorched ears also mean 7 years. Listen carefully. First, there will be 7 years of plenty in all the land of Egypt. But after that, there will be 7 years of famine that will make the 7 years of plenty forget, and famine will devastate the land. Pharaoh had 2 dreams that mean the same thing, and therefore it will happen. Let Pharaoh do this. Let him appoint overseers over the land, and during the 7 years of plenty, let him take the 5th of the produce of the land in Egypt. Let them all store up the food for the coming good years. In the name of Pharaoh, yes, let them store it up in the cities. The food will serve as a supply for the 7 evil years that will come, so that the land will not perish from hunger. And Pharaoh believed these words which Joseph had spoken unto him, and said unto his servants, Shall we ever find anyone wiser than this man, in whom is the Spirit of God? And Pharaoh said to Joseph, Because your God has made everything known to you, there is no one as understanding and wise as you. Therefore you shall rule over my house, and all my people shall accept your command. Only when it comes to the throne, I have more prestige than you. I set you over all the land of Egypt. And he took the ring from his finger and put it on Joseph's hand. And he also had beautiful garments made and put a chain of gold on his neck. And he made Joseph ride in the 2nd chariot that he had. And everyone bowed down to Joseph, because he was set over all the land of Egypt. Furthermore, Pharaoh said to Joseph, I am Pharaoh, but without your permission, no one in Egypt will lift his hand or his foot. And he gave him Asenath to wife, and they went and journeyed throughout the whole country. And Joseph was 30 years old when he entered Pharaoh's service. And in the 7 abundant years, he stored up food in the cities of Egypt. And Joseph stored up as much grain as the sand of the sea, until no one could use it anymore. And Joseph had 2 sons in Egypt, Manasseh and Ephraim, with Asenath his wife. Then the 7 years of plenty that had been in Egypt ended, and the 7 years of famine began as Joseph had said. And there was a famine in all countries, but Joseph had bread in all the land of Egypt. And the Egyptians all came to Joseph, and he opened the storehouses and sold bread. So they came from all countries to Egypt to buy grain from Joseph, because the hunger was great. And Jacob heard that there was corn for sale in Egypt, and he said to his sons, Go down to Egypt and buy corn for us, that we may live and not die. And the 10 brethren went forth, for Benjamin lagged behind father because he was afraid something would happen to him. And the 10 brethren came into Egypt and went to buy corn and other goods. Joseph was ruler over the grain, and he sold to all the people. And his brothers bowed down to him, and Joseph recognized his brothers. But he pretended to be strangers and spoke harsh words to them. Joseph asked what they had come to do, and they said to him, We have come to buy grain because there is a famine in the land of Canaan. And Joseph remembered the dreams he had dreamed before, and he said to his brothers, You are spies and have come to spy out the weak places of my country. But they said, No, my lord, your servants have come to buy food. We are all sons of one man, and we are honest people who are your servants. There were 12 of us, and one of us was left behind, and the other is no more. But Joseph said, You are spies, and you will be tested. If you wish to live, bring your brother here, so that your words may be true. Leave one of you here, and let the rest bring corn to your land, so that you may not starve. And the brothers quarreled with each other, because they now had adversity, because they had sold Joseph. And Joseph heard all this, and wept silently. And when he had recovered, he bound Simeon before their eyes and led him away to prison. He also had the money put back into the corn, and gave them food and drinks for the road. And the brothers loaded their asses with corn and returned to their father, and Simeon remained in Egypt. And when one of them opened the sack of corn, he saw his money lying there. And he called his brothers and said, My money has been put back, it is in my sack. Then their hearts sank because they were afraid of what judgment would be passed on them. When they arrived at their father's house, she told Jacob everything that had happened to them. And Jacob said, You are robbing me of children. Joseph is no longer there, and Simeon is not there either, and now you want to take Benjamin too. Reuben said to his father, You may kill my 2 sons if I do not bring Benjamin back. Give it into my hand, and I will bring it back. But Jacob said, My son will not go with you, for his brother is dead, and he is left alone. If anything happens to him, You will lay me in the grave with sorrow." But the famine remained in Canaan, and they had to go again to buy grain in Egypt. But Judah said to Jacob, "We must not see that man again, unless our youngest brother goes with us. We will only go if Benjamin goes." And Jacob said, "Why did you tell him about Benjamin?" And Judah came forward and said, "Send the boy with me, and we will go down to Egypt, so that we may live and not die. And I will stand surety for him if he does not return to you. Because if we weren't afraid to go to Egypt, we would have been there and back twice." Then Jacob said, "Go, take the best of the land and put it in your sacks, and give the man gifts: balsam, honey, spices, myrrh, pistachios, and almonds. And take double the amount of money with you, including what was on top of your business, because it might have been a mistake. Take your brother and go back to that man. And God grant you favor in the sight of that man, so that Benjamin and Simeon will come back with me. And if I am deprived of children, then I am deprived." And they took gifts and went with Benjamin to Egypt. And when Joseph saw Benjamin, he said to his servants, "Bring these men to my house, and kill cattle, and prepare them, for these men will eat with me this afternoon." And the brothers were afraid because they were brought into Joseph's house, and thought that this was happening to them, because the money had been put back in their sacks, and he was now making them slaves. When Joseph came to his house, he received the gifts from his brothers and bowed down to him. And Joseph asked about his father, and they said, "He is still alive and well." And Joseph looked at Benjamin his brother, and said, "Is this your youngest brother whom you told about?" And Joseph went into another room because he wept because of Benjamin. He recovered himself and said, "Bring the food." And the brothers sat at a table with Joseph according to age, and the brothers were amazed at this. And Joseph brought food, but Benjamin received more to eat than all the other brothers. And Joseph commanded his servants to fill their sacks with food as much as they could bear, and they were to put the money back on top. "And you shall put my silver cup in the sack of the youngest, with his money." The next morning the brothers were sent away on their donkeys, and as soon as they had gone away, Joseph said to his servants, "Go after them, and when you have them, tell me why they have taken my cup, and say that they have done wrong, while I have treated them so well." And the servants went after them and overtook them, and repeated what Joseph had spoken. But the brothers said, "We are innocent, so why should we steal silver or gold when we have returned your money? You may kill the one who has the cup, and we will all become slaves." And Joseph's servants searched the sacks, and found the cup with Benjamin. Then the brothers tore their clothes, and everyone loaded everything back onto the donkeys, and went back to Joseph. And they fell down before Joseph, and he said, "Why have you done this? Don't you know that I will soon realize this?" Judah said, "What shall we say to you? God has exposed our iniquity, and we will all become your slaves." But Joseph said, "Certainly not. Only those with whom the cup has been found, the others may return to their father." And Judah interceded for Benjamin and told the whole story of how everything had happened, of Joseph who was dead, and of Benjamin who was left only of his mother. Yes, he told Joseph all that he had said to Jacob, and at last he said, "Let me become your slave instead of Benjamin, for how shall I return to my father without Benjamin?" When Joseph heard this, he could no longer control himself and shouted to his servants, "Go away!" And when everyone had left, he shouted to his brothers, "I am Joseph. Is my father still alive?" And the brothers stood there astonished and could not utter a word. Joseph said, "Come near." And they came to him. Then Joseph said, "I am Joseph your brother, whom you sold into Egypt. Do not be sad or angry because you sold me here, for God sent me before you to keep you alive. There have been 2 years of famine, and 5 more to come, but God has sent me here to keep us alive. Now make haste, and go to my father, and tell him that your son Joseph is still alive, and that God has made him ruler over Egypt. Come to me, and delay no longer. You will live in Goshen, then you will be close to me and take everyone with you, so that I will provide for you, because there will be 5 more years of famine." Then he hugged Benjamin his brother, and both wept. Joseph kissed all his brothers and wept with them. And Pharaoh heard that Joseph's brothers were come, and it pleased him. And he said to Joseph, "Tell your brothers, take your animals and go into your country, and fetch your father and your families, and come to me. I will give you the best of the land of Egypt, and you shall eat the best of this land. And you have authority to give carts for your children and your wives. Carry your father also, and come hither." And so the brothers returned to their father, and Joseph gave them everything, including food and drink and clothes for the journey. And they came to Jacob their father into the land of Canaan, and they told him all things, even that Joseph was yet alive, and that he was ruler over the land of Egypt. And Jacob did not believe them, and his heart failed him. But when he heard and saw all that Joseph had sent, his spirit revived, and he said, "My son Joseph is still alive. I will go before I die." And they broke up everything and went down to Egypt. And Jacob offered sacrifices to God, and God spoke to him in a dream that he would see Joseph again, and God would make him into a great nation. They will also return to the land of Canaan that God has given them. And Joseph heard that his father was come into the land of Goshen, and went thither, and when he saw him, he fell on his neck and wept a long time. And Jacob said, "Now I can die because I have seen you again, and you are still alive." And Joseph went to Pharaoh to tell him that his family had arrived in the land of Goshen. And Pharaoh gave them the portion of Goshen, and they were also to take care of his cattle. And Jacob came to Pharaoh and blessed him, and Joseph supported his father and his brothers, even all his house. And Joseph bought up everything in Egypt because the famine was great in the land. So he gathered up all the money, all the cattle, and all the land, and brought them to Pharaoh. And the Egyptians served Pharaoh because Joseph had provided for them. And they were to give up the fifth part, and they were to keep the other 4 parts for themselves. And the children of Israel dwelt in the land of Goshen, and increased, so that they became a very great nation. And Jacob lived in Egypt 17 years. And when his last days came, he blessed the sons of Joseph, and he blessed his sons also. Jacob gave the final orders as to where he wanted to be buried and died. And Jacob was buried in the land of Canaan with Abraham and Isaac. When their father died, the brothers were afraid of Joseph because he might hate them for what they did to him. And they came to Joseph and fell down before him and said unto him, "We will be your slaves because we have done you evil." But Joseph said to them, "Do not be afraid, for am I in the place of God? You have done evil, but God has used it in the right way to keep our people alive. So do not be afraid and return to your families, for I will keep you alive." And Joseph abode in Egypt and all the people, and he saw the 3rd generation coming after him. He said to his brothers, "I am going to die, but God will lead you from this to the land of Canaan. You must take my bones." And Joseph died, aged 110. This was the life story of Joseph, from slave to viceroy. We at Bible Teller wish you all the best. Be sure to keep an eye on us for more biblical teaching and stories. Start your free membership on YouTube by clicking on the subscribe button, and see you next time.